The Jesus Timeline, Part 2, The Christians Try to Explain. In the last video, we reviewed the different timelines provided by the different gospel accounts of the life of Jesus and tried to reconcile them with each other and with what we know about history. We reviewed what a hopeless task this was. Now, the strongest timeline was provided by the Gospel of Luke, or the one most consistent with what we know about history. There was a census that was done by Governor Quirinius of Syria around 6 CE, and Luke's Jesus is also fairly consistent with the ministry of John the Baptist and also the administration of Pontius Pilate. The only thing we need to fudge is when Jesus began his ministry. Luke says it was about 30, but that could be 29 or 28 going on 29. So we can move John the Baptist's arrest back by about a year, giving us enough time for Jesus to have run his ministry, be arrested, and eventually crucified by Pontius Pilate in time for Pilate to be recalled to Rome in 36 AD. The problem is reconciling it with Matthew and John. And the tongue-in-cheek advice I gave to Christians is just throw out the Gospels of Matthew and John and just go with Luke. Of course, they can't do that. The challenge for Christians is they can't abandon any of the four Gospels. They all have to be reconciled with each other. They also can't move Herod the Great's date of death. It's too well documented as late March or early April of 4 BCE. And that unfortunately means they need to go with Matthew instead of with Luke. This also means that JC must have been born no later than 5 BCE, whether you go by the December 25th date or the date that a lot of scholars go with of sometime around September. Quirinius and John the Baptist must be moved to allow for the gospel story. Now, the Christian attempts at that have included Josh McDowell's, who writes about an earlier census from 9 to 8 BCE and tries to tie it into the story of Jesus. The question I have for those who are more familiar with Roman history is, did Rome have the authority to directly tax the citizens of Judea, never mind order them to move about to their hometowns for a census, while Judea was a quasi-independent tributary? The whole idea of a tributary, as I understood it, was that it pays tribute to a nation instead of being a province of a nation, which Judea eventually did become. But at this time, it was a tributary run by King Herod the Great. But moving on, getting back to the census, it needs to be pushed forward. McDowell's date of 7 BCE misses this census. Also, having Jesus born during 8 to 7 BCE would make Jesus too old by the time John the Baptist starts his ministry. Now, one Christian apologist attempted to solve this problem by moving the date of the census forward to 5 BCE, by claiming that Herod dragged his heels and drew out the census for another 3 years, thereby giving Mary time to make her way to Bethlehem and give birth to Jesus. For right now, we'll just go ahead and assume that that is the case, though I would appreciate it if J.C. Forerunner would kindly provide some evidence as to why we should believe that Herod dragged his heels and dragged out the census for 3 years. Now, where in the world was Quirinius during that time? McDowell says that he was the governor of Syria twice, once around 7 BCE. We know that who the governor of Syria was at this time, and it was not Quirinius. Now, maybe Luke never meant to say governor. Maybe he just meant to say that Quirinius was some sort of administrator of the census. This is the theory that is offered by J.C. Forerunner, and it confuses me, because my New Oxford Annotated Bible, Authorized King James Bible, and Contemporary English Version all three use the word governor. In fact, the New Oxford Annotated Bible, which includes a lot of notes about different points of history as well as translation issues, says nothing about this issue of translating the word governor, or what Luke might have meant to say. But for right now, let's just go ahead and assume that that is a plausible explanation. Could Quirinius have been a procurator of Syria around 5 BCE? The problem is he was the governor of another province at that time, a province located in modern central Turkey. So maybe he was a good multitasker and could hold 2 offices at once? This seems really doubtful. Anyway, you also need to move John the Baptist's ministry back a bit. Luke says in chapter 3, verse 1, that it got started in the 15th year of the reign of Emperor Tiberius, which I've noted as 29 CE. J.C. Forerunner says Augustus died on August 19, 14 AD. The Jewish New Year started in September. While it is true that Rosh Hashanah usually starts in early September, Tiberius was not made emperor until September 18th, At best, you can push John the Baptist's ministry to start during the last 4 months of 28 CE. Jesus, if he was born in 5 BCE, would have still been too old by that time. We also need to remember that the start of John the Baptist's ministry is not the start of Jesus' ministry. John the Baptist is treated as the forerunner of Jesus. In John chapter 1 verse 23, has him saying, "I am the voice of one crying in the wilderness, make straight the way of the Lord." The implication is that he had been practicing his ministry for some time, paving the way for Jesus. Also, John the Baptist's ministry was described as a huge success. Crowds came to be baptized by him, according to Luke chapter 3 verse 7. They came from all over, according to Mark chapter 1 verse 5. And they even ask if he's the Messiah, John chapter 1 verse 20. He's even mentioned in Josephus, without the need of forgery. To say that his career began and ended the same year stretches credibility. Indeed, to say his career began and ended within months stretches credibility. Now, moving the Gospel of John forward, something else that they need to do. The date for the construction of the Second Temple began in 20 BCE, according to the New Oxford Annotated Bible, footnotes on page 152, New Testament. This indicates that the dates of the Temple Tantrum happened just before the Passover on 27 CE, and the crucifixion in 29 CE. Now, J.C. Forerunner corrected me in my math that there is no year 0, and since there is no year 0, the dates would actually be 27 and 29. Regardless, the construction of the temple needs to be moved forward by 2 years. You'd have to in order to make that fit. So let's review all these assumptions. 1. Rome could conduct a census in Judea between 9 and 5 BCE. 2. The census was dragged on for 3 more years so Jesus could be born as late as possible. 3. When Luke's Gospel says governor, it really should be translated as procurator, and the KJV, NRSV 3rd edition, and CEV somehow all missed that. 4. Quirinius would be attributed as the procurator of the census despite being the governor of another province at that time. 5. When Luke says about 30, he really means 33. 6. John the Baptist was an overnight smash success. He had crowds coming from all over to be baptized. Some asked if he was Elijah. He blazed the trail for Jesus. He was noted by historians like Josephus, and he was locked away because of all the controversy he caused. And all of this within the last few months of the year 28 CE. All this while competing against a horde of Messiah pretenders that abounded in Judea at that time. Fast work indeed. And by the way, side note here, the last few months would have been October, November, and December. Could you really be baptizing people in the River Jordan during that time? As someone who knows a little bit more about the climate in that region might know the answer to this, but how cold does it get, and could you be baptizing people in the River Jordan sometime around November or December? Just curious. Anyway, moving on to even more assumptions. 7. The date of 20 BCE for the start of the temple construction is wrong. It should be at least 2 years later. 8. The dates that Josephus provides us for John the Baptist's ministry are also wrong. 9. We should pay no attention to the fact that the Gospel of John contradicts the Synoptics by placing the start of JC's ministry before John the Baptist's arrest and not after. So, which is more likely? That we should swallow all of these fudge factors, many of which are assumptions and ad hoc explanations pulled out of the air, some of which are rather unlikely, in an effort to reconcile all these different accounts? Or that the contradictions between Matthew and Luke are due to the fact that 2 story writers worked completely independently of each other? May God's gift of reason light our way.